The file begins. While tabloids in early 2026 track his dates and fan forums debate his return to a spandex suit, a different document circulates in quieter, more expensive rooms. A ghost from a decade past. Federal indictments smelling of old money and fresh ink are unsealed. The anatomy of a fall, long thought complete, gains a new, unexpected chapter. The sheen of his public image, the amicable father, the reluctant superstar, was always a careful construction. Underneath, there was the concrete foundation of another world. A world of clandestine poker games in hotel suites where millions of dollars were just chips on a table. The shockwave is not that it happened. The shockwave is that the statute of limitations on greed is proving to be a fiction. This is not a sequel. It is a post-mortem audit. The original collapse centered on a man named Bradley Ruderman, whose hedge fund was a classic Ponzi scheme, a house of cards built on the life savings of ordinary people. Tobey Maguire was a frequent winner in the games funded by Ruderman's stolen millions. He was sued by the bankruptcy trustee to reclaim the winnings, eventually settling out of court. A clean resolution, or so it seemed. The 2026 proceedings are different. They are not about reclaiming funds. They are about the architecture of the sin itself. The focus shifts from the players to the organizers, the money launderers, the entire ecosystem that fed on Ruderman's fraud. The initial pursuit of a few $100,000 has mutated into a full-blown criminal investigation. Tobey Maguire won over $300,000 from a ruined man's victims. A forgotten footnote now becomes the central exhibit in a new trial. This is the true price of the game. The game was not born in a back alley. It was conceived in the hushed suites of the Viper Room and the Four Seasons, a secret society for men who confused money with invincibility. It began as an escape from the crushing boredom of fame, a place where a bad hand cost a new Porsche, not a career. A whispered invitation, a password at a guarded door. And into this gilded cage walked Tobey Maguire. He was not just a guest. He was an architect of its culture. Witnesses from those early days don't speak of the friendly neighborhood hero. They describe a player of unnerving focus, a shark who could smell fear through a wall of cigar smoke. He was reportedly a bad tipper and a worse loser. A sore winner. It was the initial fatal miscalculation. The belief that this private kingdom, built on ego and adrenaline, would remain forever disconnected from the real world. This was his Rockavaya Oshipka. The evolution was subtle, a poison with no taste. The casual gatherings mutated into a structured, illicit enterprise. The friendly buy-ins of $50,000 swelled into wire transfers with 6 zeros, routed through shell corporations that smelled of desperation. The game was no longer about bragging rights. It was about servicing debt. It was about laundering reputations and cash. The men who delivered the money and collected the losses did not look like studio assistants. The lines blurred until they vanished completely, leaving a landscape of paranoia. For every winner, there were others whose careers were quietly dismantled, their assets liquidated to pay off a single bad night. And Escalation судьба, signed and sealed at a poker table. This was the true Мясорубка Slava, where stars went in and ghosts came out. The whole operation was no longer a game. It was a morgue for ambition. The invitations arrived not as paper, but as whispers. A secure message, A call from a burner phone. The locations shifted constantly, from penthouse suites overlooking a sleeping Los Angeles to soundproofed basements that felt more like a Paul's shadow bunker. This secrecy was the primary asset. It created a mythology, a sense that one was not merely playing cards, but being initiated into a silent order. The gleam of the chips and the vintage of the whiskey were a carefully constructed stage, a performance of wealth designed to distract from the real transaction, the exchange of power. The unwritten rule was absolute. You do not talk about the game, ever. This wasn't about losing money you couldn't afford. It was about seeing things you were not meant to see, hearing confessions you were not meant to hear. The price of a seat was your silence, a permanent, binding contract. The shimmer was a facade, a thin veneer of civility over a far more dangerous reality. It was an exclusive club where membership was paid for not in dollars, but in complicity. The first tremors were barely perceptible, not headlines, but whispers in legal filings. A dismissed civil suit from a hedge fund manager in 2009. A sealed testimony from a television actor who claimed his losses were collected with unwarranted aggression. Each claim was treated as an anomaly, the bitter grapes of a sore loser. Maguire's name, when it surfaced, was insulated by layers of lawyers and plausible deniability. The system was designed to crush these sparks before they could catch fire. Settlements were reached in sterile conference rooms. The figures kept confidential. The accusers bound by non-disclosure agreements that were, in themselves, a kind of prigover. This was the anatomy of the cover-up, a quiet, methodical process of erasure. It was a Rockavai Oshipka to believe these small fires could be stamped out forever. Each buried testimony was a seed of resentment planted in the foundations of the empire, a debt that would one day come due, with interest. The official record showed nothing, but the unofficial one, the Inventarizatsiya Grekov, was growing longer with each silenced voice. The first crack in the wall of silence came not from a ruined millionaire, but from a cocktail waitress. A woman paid to be invisible, to refill glasses and forget faces. Her name was scrubbed from the initial filings, a ghost in the machine whose testimony was considered a clerical error until one junior litigator saw the pattern. She kept a ledger, not of money but of moods and whispers, of men who arrived in Bentleys and left with the 1,000-yard stare of the condemned. Her meticulous notes, recorded on the backs of receipts, became the Rosetta Stone for prosecutors. They detailed the choreography of the room, how certain players were steered away from Maguire's table, how new, wealthy marks were tenderized with a few easy wins before the real slaughter began. This wasn't a game of chance. It was an abattoir dressed in velvet. The lawyers called it evidence of a pattern of predatory behavior. The waitress called it watching souls get repossessed in real time. It was a fatal mistake to underestimate the people in the shadows. They see everything. Each name in the waitress's ledger was a broken fate. Consider the case of a television producer who once called Maguire a friend. He entered the game chasing the thrill, the proximity to power that smelled like expensive cologne and desperation. He left it a ghost. His production company, once a rising star, was leveraged, then liquidated to cover debts that were never officially recorded. His story, pieced together from bankruptcy filings and a single bitter interview, is the blueprint of the fall. The initial shine of easy money and A-list company. The slow descent into addiction, chasing losses with bigger bets. Pause. The final quiet implosion. He described nights where the stakes weren't just cash, but career opportunities, film roles, and personal dignity. The game became a grinder of fame. He wasn't the only one. They were the wreckage of an empire, the human cost of a game where the house was designed to never, ever lose. Their ruin was the fuel for the machine, a necessary and entirely acceptable byproduct. The real sentence wasn't the financial loss. It was being erased from a world you helped build. And yet the erasure was not total. It was worse. It was a branding, a permanent stain that no amount of Marvel money can wash away. The boyish face, once a symbol of earnest heroism, now carries the shadow of the backroom. His rumored return to the multiverse is not a resurrection. It is a haunting. He is a ghost hired to play a hero. His presence a constant unspoken reminder of the fall. The public sees the amicable photos with his ex-wife, the carefully curated image of stability. They also see the paparazzi shots with women young enough to have had his poster on their wall. A desperate chase for something lost. Pause, or perhaps just profound, unvarnished loneliness. This is the anatomy of his isolation. He is surrounded by the machinery of fame, yet utterly alone inside it. The quiet hum of the air conditioner in a Bel Air mansion sounding exactly like the silence of a tomb. The final audit of Tobey Maguire reveals a paradox. The line between the Blesk of Hollywood and the nishita of the human soul has been irrevocably blurred. The scandal left no criminal record, only a permanent indictment in the court of reputation. A sentence served in a prison of his own making, with walls of gold and windows that look out onto a world that remembers what he did when he thought no one was watching. The game was never about the money. It was about the proximity to the edge, the thrill of a risk that fame had otherwise eliminated. His story is the bitter testament of the man who had everything and went searching for something more in the dark. He found it, and it cost him the one thing he can never buy back. Pause. Innocence. The legacy is not the heroics on screen, but the cautionary tale whispered in the shadows. The real house always wins.